Joining us from Beirut is the veteran journalist and the senior diplomatic correspondent for Al Hayat, Raghida Dergham. Here in Washington is the president and global affairs correspondent for Feature Story News, Simon Marks. And with us from Georgetown University is presidential scholar Stephen Wayne. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's start by going around the table to get your views on what happened yesterday. Professor Wayne, let's start with you.
Well, there was a large Republican victory, I think a little bit larger than people expected, particularly in the Senate. It looks like there was a very low turnout, so Democrats didn't get their people out to vote. There was a lot of dismay expressed by the American people, but the attitudes towards the parties and towards the functioning of government haven't changed, and they're negative.
Raghida Dergham, what was your take on what happened yesterday?
There is a dismay, not only with the president, but with the policies of the United States. It seems to me that public is a little confused. On one hand, they want to be an isolationist, but on the other hand, they want leadership. So it's a bit of a confused public that is quite upset with the president, and therefore I think foreign policy will be impacted because leadership will then translate itself on that level.
Simon, a big victory for the Republicans, but it was not unexpected.
No, it wasn't unexpected. These are chickens coming home to roost for Barack Obama. It's very clear from the exit poll data that there is a great degree of disillusionment with him personally and with his failure to fulfill the promises that he made on the campaign trail in 2012 and, of course, initially in 2008. I'm not sure this was an American public embracing isolationism. I don't think that the foreign policy arguments on the campaign trail were the dominant factor here. This was a Republican Party better adept at getting its vote out in this particular election cycle than the Democrats, because the exit polls clearly show grassroots Democrats feel let down, and core constituencies decided they were going to vote with their feet and sit this one out.
Stephen Wayne, I just want to get to a point that Simon just made, that this was a repudiation of President Barack Obama. Was that the full story here?
I think that was partially it. First of all, I agree this was not an election about foreign policy, and I think there are significant leadership implications in the result for President Obama, but I don't see necessarily a change in U.S. policy. The American people were discontented, and I agree that some of the discontent was on the far left because the president has not improve the conditions or has not fulfilled the promises he made in 2008 and 2012. Now, the problem was he overpromised. He promised to transform policy and transform politics. He did have an effect on policy, but the jury is still out on his health care, and the economy is turning around, but slowly. But he didn't affect politics. Politics seemed to affect him, and it seemed to imprison him within his party and within his office.
Right, Raghida, you say this will have an impact on foreign policy. What do you expect from Congress? Will you see now a more interventionist foreign policy? Will you see perhaps greater U.S. involvement against ISIL, against the civil war that's going on in Syria? Will we see the legislature perhaps moving rather than the president?
Yes, of course, the foreign policy will be impacted. Let us take a look, for example, at what President Barack Obama wanted for himself as a legacy. He wanted an agreement, a nuclear agreement with Iran. I would suspect that the Republicans now in both houses are not going to let this be an easy task for the president. They actually, I would bet, they're going to make it impossible if this is the deal as they see it now, because they are not happy with this deal. They feel that it's a weak deal. I would imagine that they will also call on the president to exercise his own leadership that he promised, or say, put his words to action in Syria. If he had said that the policy is to bring down Bashar al-Assad, they're going to say, show us where you're going to deliver. I think they will address several things in the region. I think they will also talk about the use of the weapon of, say, economic weapon, not only in sanctions, but also in oil pricing, for example, towards in dealing with Russia. They will be trying they'll try to push more on China. However, I don't think they're in a position to say, let's go to war, though I would say that possibly at one point they're going to have to say, yes, we're going to have to do some boots on the ground in Iraq. So I think, yes, of course, I insist on what I said. Foreign policy will be impacted. I never said that this election was about foreign policy. I said it will impact foreign policy.
Okay, Simon, when we look at the results last night as they were coming in, as you said, not unexpected, but were you surprised by the extent of the rout?
I tell you what I was surprised by, the geographical spread of the rout. Democratic strategists in this town and in other parts of the country for the past 3 election cycles have been saying the Republicans are destroyed as a national party. They're a party of the Confederacy. They're a party of the South. You now have Republican governors being elected just up the road from where we are in the state of Maryland, in Illinois, Barack Obama's home turf, in Massachusetts, in places where it's astounding to imagine that Republicans can achieve that. West Virginia electing its first Republican senator since 1956. So if you're a Republican right now, you are feeling pretty good, not just about the results, but about the fact that you have demonstrated that you can absolutely compete with the Democrats on a national playing field. However, millions of Americans participated in these elections. Many millions more stayed away and chose to sit them out. The situation in 2016 for the presidential race will look very different.
Stephen, Wayne, you wanted to say something earlier on?
No, that's fine. I agree with the last comment. The early estimates are only about 37% voted. In the last presidential election, it was over 60% of the eligible voters. So it was a show of people who were discontent with Obama, and more Republicans came out. Republicans usually have a turnout advantage, particularly in a low turnout election.
Raghida, this is not the first time that this has happened. There have been other presidents who've had to deal with a Congress that comes from the opposition party. How have other presidents navigated this issue?
Look, I mean, I'm not going to compete with the professor on, as far as what is the history of how former presidents dealt with such situations, but I think there's a particular loss for the Democrats in this case, because this is not easy to be a sitting president and have a vote of non-confidence in him. I mean, this is a man who came in to say, I will change America and the world, and then all of a sudden the world is saying where and the Americans is saying how, and therefore it is going, as somebody said earlier, I believe it will impact the fight for the White House in a couple of years, and I don't think it's going to be an easy run for the Democrats. So you know, again, you know, presidents could bring something to Congress, like if you remember, President Clinton brought Kyoto to Congress, and the Congress said no, not so fast. So I think President Obama is going to have a very tough time because of his own record, if you will, and also because of that lack of confidence in him by the public and the anger. In fact, you know, sort of like the Republicans are really intent on giving him a hard time through nominations or holding on nominations. They're going to give him a very hard time, so that once it gets to the real thing, which is the presidential race, they have to earn it from their point of view. That's how they feel.
Okay,
they want to earn it.
When you're a president who is constrained politically because you're facing hostile majorities in Congress, there's not much you can get done domestically. Traditionally, you race to foreign policy. That's where you can act without much, without many brakes being put on you. But Raghida is absolutely right. Iran nuclear talks are now going to be a massive problem for Barack Obama, because any kind of agreement's going to require congressional approval. He may not get that congressional approval. There are areas in foreign policy where he's going to find himself similarly constrained, even as his record is assailed by presidential candidates circling in the waters to succeed him. One other point about turnout. It's very difficult for the United States to continue projecting itself globally as a paragon of democratic virtue when so many people in such an important election say, we're so disillusioned with our leaders, we're going to stay at home.
Right. Professor Wayne, historically, how have other leaders dealt with the situation when they have the opposition in Congress? And Simon makes a great point. They have moved to foreign policy to make their points. I mean, we take Ronald Reagan. He In the last 2 years of his presidency, negotiated an end to the Cold War. We take Bill Clinton. He played a key role in the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland. We take George Bush. He expanded AIDS help in Africa. So is there an opportunity here for Barack Obama to show what he can do in the last
And
few
he
years?
also agreed to the buyout. That's correct. Yeah. First of all, you have to realize that there are 3 legislative sessions coming up. There's the lame duck session, where the Democrats will be in control, and where if the president has judicial nominations, he's got to get them before the Democrats. They also have to work on a budget, which has just been delayed. Then we have the 2015 session, where the Republicans take over, and that's the session where if compromises are going to occur, they're going to occur in that session. Republicans are interested in trade. The president is interested in cybersecurity. There'll be a number of measures where they can compromise, including appropriation bills. So I think there will be, Barack Obama will compromise, but whether he'll politic like Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton did is another question. He's pretty standoffish. He's more like Jimmy Carter when it comes to Washington politics. Then 2016 is the presidential election, and both sides will be supporting issues that they think will help them in the polls. If there's going to be immigration, it's going to be 2015. If there's going to be a trade bill, it's going to be 2015.
Okay, we need to take a break right now. We'll continue our conversation right after that. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.